2008, and we're talking to Bernard Berkovits, and we're tape recording it. And Bernard, where were you born and when were you born?
I was born in a small town in Bacheva, and when I was born, that part of the world was Czechoslovakia.
Right. Okay. So the name of the town was Bacheva?
Yeah. B-A-C-A-V-A. Bacheva.
Okay. And when's your birthday?
February the 22nd, 1929.
Okay. And Bernie, you remember your parents?
Yes.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Marthe Berkovits, or Marcus Berkovits.
Okay. And what did he do for a living?
He was a farmer.
And now, was that a business that he started himself, or did he inherit that?
He inherited from his family.
And did a lot of people work on the farm?
It was a small farm.
Right.
And mostly family, and not too many people, no.
No, okay, so it was mostly, he didn't have outside people coming in?
No.
No. And what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Pessel, Yiddish, Peppy Berkovits.
Right. Do you know what her maiden name was?
Yes, Pessel. Maiden name was Schwartz.
Schwartz?
Yes.
Okay. And what did Pessel, what did she do?
She was a housewife.
Did she also work on the farm?
Yes, she cooked and cleaned and also helped on the farm, yes.
And how many children were there?
There were 4 children.
And what number were you?
I was number 1.
And who was number 2? What was her name?
David.
And number 3?
Number 3 was Hinda.
Hinda? And who was the little one?
Abraham.
Okay. Now, Bernard, of the 6 people in your family, how many survived the Holocaust?
I am the only survivor.
You're the only one. Now, when you were little, you lived in a house, right?
Yes.
Was this a 1-story house or 2 stories?
1 story.
And did you have your own bedroom, or did you share it?
We shared it.
So, who did you share it with?
With my brothers.
So, did you have your own bed, or did you share that too?
We shared the bed.
Right, so how many in one bed?
2.
2. And do you know how many rooms the house was?
The house was 3 rooms, 3 bedrooms.
Were there other rooms besides the bedrooms?
Well, no, there was a living room, and there was a kitchen and an oven. It was a farmhouse, really.
Right.
And the community was a very small community, and most people were poor people.
Did you live in a Jewish neighborhood?
It was mixed.
Would you say mostly Jewish or no?
Well, no. I'd say maybe 30% Jewish and 70% non-Jewish.
Now, do you still remember the address you lived at, the street?
No, not really.
No. Now,
there were not too many streets in that small village. It was only a couple of streets.
Now, you didn't have a refrigerator, so how did you keep things cold?
That's a very good question. We kept stuff in the cellar, and really there were no refrigeration at all.
Right.
And it was really a problem. I don't remember, now thinking back, how we sort of kept the food from getting spoiled.
Right. So on the farm, you had animals, right? Like chickens.
Yes,
and
we had, I had chicken and geese and ducks, and we had cows.
How many cows did you have?
Mostly 3 or 4 cows.
And did you have any horses?
No.
No. On a farm, you'd think they need horses, right? No?
Well, we used horses. My father sort of rented or shared horses.
Right.
Because we had uncles and aunts, and my grandmother. Most of the family lived in that small village.
Right. So the chickens, they lived in a coop, like a chicken house?
No, they were free.
They would take us for free?
Free, like they were on the farmland by the house.
So,
But they had a chicken coop also for at night. They went into the chicken coop.
whose job was it to get the eggs?
I suppose my mother.
Right. And did you have a barn?
Yes, we had a barn.
And who milked the cows?
I guess my mother, my father. I was too young to milk the cows.
And do you remember having fruit trees, like apple trees and pear trees?
We had some fruit trees.
Right.
We had some apple trees and some pear trees. We had some trees.
And what kind of things did you grow on the farm?
Wheat mostly, corn, wheat, potatoes. Potatoes was the main thing, and also wheat. And also hay for the cows for the winter.
Right. So did you live mostly off the farm, or did you buy other food?
I would say we lived mostly off the farm.
Right. Now, Bernard, the street in front of your house, was that a paved road with sidewalks, or was it a dirt road or cobblestones? What was it?
A dirt road.
A dirt road. And what was traveling on that road? Was it mostly people walking, or bicycles, or drushkas?
Mostly people walking and wagons.
Horses. Do you ever remember seeing automobiles go by?
Maybe once or twice in the time that I was living in Bacheva.
Really? So almost never?
Almost never.
Right. Now, was your family, were they very religious?
Yes.
So, did she have a shidel?
Yes.
Did your father have a beard and a hat and a strommel?
Yeah, not a strommel, a beard and a hat.
Right.
And we all wore tzitzis.
So, okay, what about payas?
Payas also. I wore payas when I was living in Bacheva.
Right. Now, Bernard, when you were a kid, what kind of kid were you? Were you a good athlete? Were you good in school?
I was average, I would suppose. So school was limited. We went to, there was one school for the whole village, and Jewish and non-Jewish kids participated. And I also went to a cheder.
Right. Right. So you...
The cheder was the Malamed who was teaching the children, was moving from one Jewish family house to another Jewish family house. And he was to sleep and eat in the house and also teach the children in that house.
Right. Now...
It was a very poor farming community.
How many years of school did you have before the war?
I would say about, let me see, about 6 or 7 years.
Okay. And do you remember going swimming?
Yes.
Where did you go swimming?
In the river. We had a river that went right through our village.
Do you know the name of the river?
Yes, we called it Stara, like old Stara.
Right.
It's the name of the river.
And now, would the boys and girls swim separately?
No.
No. And do you remember going ice skating?
Not really.
No. And what about playing soccer?
Yes, we used to kick the ball on the street.
Oh, so you played on the street?
Yes.
Now, what did you use for a soccer ball?
A ball.
Like a regular soccer ball?
Regular soccer ball, not as fancy as they have these days, but we had a regular soccer ball, a ball.
And
that was the main thing, playing soccer on the street.
Did you play with only Jewish kids?
Yes.
Right. Do you remember going sleigh riding?
Yes.
And did you ever play ping pong before the war?
No.
No. How tall are you?
Now I am 5'8". When 5'9" possibly, but when I was in the service, on my military papers, it shows me as 5'11".
Right. Now, do you remember any of your grandparents? Did you know them?
I knew my two grandmothers, but my grandfathers were dead. As a matter of fact, I'm named for my father's father.
What was his name?
His name was Dov Eliezer. In Hebrew, Yiddish was Berel Eliezer.
Berel, yeah?
Berel Eliezer.
Right. You didn't know any great-grandparents, did you?
No.
No. Now, what was Berel's wife's name?
Hannah.
Hannah?
Or Hannah.
Okay, and what do you remember about Hannah?
Well, she was also a housewife. You know, she had really 7 children. We had 5. She had 5 boys. I had 4 uncles and 2 aunts from my father's side.
Right.
And I remember 3 of them survived the war.
Really? What is Hannah? Where did she live?
She lived in Batsheva, too.
Okay. And did she live in a house?
Yes.
And was she very religious?
Yes.
Would you visit her, or would she visit you mostly?
Well, we visited each other. We visited her mostly.
Right. Do you remember anything else about her?
I loved her. That's all I remember. She was my booba. And
Now,
that's all I remember about her. I remember my father and his brothers, and also 2 sisters. One sister lived in Batsheva, and
Yep.
one sister got married and moved to another neighboring village.
right. Now, Beryl, do you know what he did for a living?
Who?
Your grandfather. You know, Hannah.
He was farming. He was also a small farm. As a matter of fact, my father bought half the farm from my grandmother. You know, I don't know if you know the customs of the old country, how we used to live, and my father married my mother. You know, she came with a dowry.
Right.
And my father and mother both used that dowry to buy half the farm.
Right. Okay. Now, Beryl and Hannah, they had 7 children?
Yes, they had 5 boys and 2 girls.
And how many of them could you name?
All of them.
Go ahead.
My father's name was Mordcha,
Right.
and his brother's name was Shulem,
Yeah.
Meyer,
Yeah.
Srulhash,
Yeah.
and Sam. He was in the United States. I called him Sam all the time.
Right.
Shloima.
Right.
Shloima Zalman. Shloima. The 5 brothers.
Right.
And the 2 sisters were Shaindl and Rivka.
And how many of them survived the war?
In Europe, only 2.
Who?
Meyer and Srulhash.
Were they in camps?
They were in labor camps.
Right.
As a matter of fact, one was in a labor camp and one was in the Czech army in Russia.
Who was in the labor camp?
Meyer.
Right. And who survived in America?
Shlomo Zalman.
And
Shlomo.
what about the sisters?
The sisters all died
Right.
in camps.
Now,
You know, everybody really died in the camps. Most of the whole family, practically.
now, what did your father's brothers, what did they do for a living?
One of them was in the army.
Who?
The youngest, Shul Hersh,
Yeah.
or Herman. In Israel, they call him Tzvi.
Right.
And the other one, Meir, was a chazan
Right.
and also a teacher.
Oh, okay.
And Shulem was also a young man, I suppose in his 20s or so. He just married recently.
Do you remember his wife's name?
Rivka.
Right. Did she survive?
No.
Right.
Him and his whole family had small children. They all perished.
Right. How many children did he have?
3 children.
Do you remember any of their names?
No.
Right. Did you have... Okay, what did Shlomo do in
Here
America?
in this country,
Yeah.
he was working as a furrier
In New York?
in New York.
Right. So do you have cousins from that side of the family?
From that side of the family, not... Yes, I had really 4 cousins in Israel.
Right.
Because my Uncle Meyer had 2 boys, the second marriage,
Right.
because the first family perished in Auschwitz. And also, Tzvi Sruharsh had 2 boys in Israel.
Right.
So I had 4 cousins in Israel, but one of my cousins got killed in the 6-Day War.
Which one?
In Israel, which one? One of Meyer's sons.
Right, okay.
In the army, in
Right.
the Haganah.
Okay. Now, what was your mother's mother? What was her name?
my mother's mother, Gittel.
Gittel?
Yes.
And what do you remember about Gittel?
Very little, because they didn't live with us. They lived in another very small town near Ungvar or Ushhorod.
Right. So what was the name of the town?
Well, I can give you the name of the town. Ingvar or Ungvar.
Yeah.
Or Ushhorod.
Right. Okay. And do you remember visiting her, or did she visit you?
You know, we visited maybe twice a year. We've seen them.
Right. How would you travel to visit her?
With a wagon, horse and wagon.
Was it a long trip?
A couple of hours.
Would the whole family go?
Usually me, my mother, and my brothers, younger brother, and sometimes my mother and father went by themselves.
Right.
But it was not a frequent trip. It was, mostly my mother was always going for Kaiveruas, before the high holidays, before the Anteuben.
Right. So what else do you remember about Gittel?
Not much. Not much.
Did she live in a house?
Yeah, she lived in a house, and my grandfather...
What was his name?
He was dead when I, was born. He was gone already.
Do you know his name? Or?
Just one of my brothers was named for him. Avram.
Avram?
Yeah, the youngest.
Right.
My youngest brother was named for him, for my grandfather.
Right.
And he was a merchant.
Do you know what he dealt with?
Yes, he was dealing with. He was buying and selling mostly animals, horses, cows, and stuff like that.
Right.
He was a little bit better off than the rest of the family.
Right. Was Gittel religious?
Yes.
So she had a sheitel and...
Yes.
Right. And how many children did Avram and Gittel have?
They had 3 daughters and 1 son.
And what were their names?
The son's name was Mordechai. He was a frequent visitor to our house, but I forgot the other names.
Okay. Did any of them survive the war?
No.
And what did he do for a living?
He did also did with his grandfather. He was a merchant too, like handled with animals.
Right. Was he married with children?
No.
No.
No, not when I was still there.
No. Okay. Now, Bernie, when you were little, how did you get around? On foot or bicycle, horse and buggy, streetcar?
Mostly on foot, on a bicycle, walking, walking or a bicycle,
Right.
To share.
Now, so you had your own bicycle?
No.
No. And when you rode a bicycle back then, did you have to lock it up with a keychain?
No, we didn't have any keychains to lock things up. We just brought it in the house.
Right. And you remember being on a horse and wagon?
Yeah, I used to ride a horse too.
Really? With a saddle or without a saddle?
Without a saddle.
Right. And do you ever remember being in an automobile before the war?
No.
What about a train?
No.
No. And
the first train I ever wore, the first train when they loaded us on trains from the brick factory, from the Teglojar, from Ungvar, the Nazis, that they put us into these cattle cars. That was the first train I've ever been on.
Really? Did you have electricity at home?
No.
So what did you use for lights?
Lamps.
Right.
Lamps, candles.
And the
kerosene, mostly kerosene lamps.
Right. Now, the bathroom, that was outside?
Outside.
Was it close to the house?
Yes, so not too far.
And whose job was it to clean it out periodically?
Usually my father took care of it.
And what did they use for toilet paper?
That's a good question. Paper. I suppose it was sandpaper. I don't know where they got it.
And how did you get water?
Water from a brin. From a
well?
A well, yes.
And was that well on your property?
Sort of, yes.
And who would bring in the water?
My father.
Right.
My mother, me.
So, you had to heat the water to take a bath?
Yes.
So,
we had a mikveh.
So did you go to the mikveh, or did you take a bath at home?
We went to the mikveh every week.
Right.
The Jewish people had a mikveh.
Okay.
We had a mikveh, and we also had like a beetle. We next to the mikveh, like a pool or something you call it, and we had, like next door, if you wanted to wash up, you were able to wash,
Right.
which was like mostly a weekly ritual to go before Shabbos, to go to the mikveh.
Now, the stove in your house, was that a wood stove or coal?
Wood. And also coal. If you had money, you were able to buy coal, you bought coal, but it was wood stove.
So you never had a...
We also had an oven in the house, which
Right.
was used to bake bread. It makes chulent,
Right.
if you know what that is.
Yeah. What kind of oven was it?
It was a brick oven.
Right. Do you ever remember using a telephone before the war?
I never seen a telephone.
Never saw a telephone. Now, were you born in a hospital or at home?
At home.
And do you remember having a lot of toys when you were little?
I didn't have any toys.
I mean, did you have a ball or...
We shared that ball, but we didn't have no such things. We were very, very poor.
So what kind of games did you play?
We played chess.
Chess?
Chess. I played chess.
Right. And what else?
And we played cards, chess,
Right.
and the way the people, the young people, used to sort of socialize. They'd meet in different houses, and they used to, like knit or take feathers from geese, and take the middle out to make pillows and stuff like that. And in the fall, they used to make what they call lekvar, and they used to, from fruit.
Right.
Like do canning of fruit and stuff. So used to always, socialize amongst ourselves. And the older Jewish people went to a Kurstibel in the shul. Kurstibel was like an extra room where they used to study. The older Jewish people used to go to read there and talk and stuff like that. It was, but we didn't have any. We didn't even have a radio.
Right. Now, so do you think it was better the way it was when you were little, where you didn't have any toys, or the way it is in America, where they have too many toys?
That's very hard to say. I didn't miss anything because I didn't know any better.
Right.
My kids and my grandkids, they should live and be well. They have so much stuff, so many toys. The closets are full. I don't think they appreciate anything.
Right.
I mean, it's great, really. I mean, this is a great country. We're living in really in a paradise here, and there's no comparison. You can't compare it. And I can't even describe it. I'm going to be 80 years old when I think back, the way we lived, and I says, my good God, we didn't know any better, but I suppose we were happy. We had each other. We had the family.
Right.
And we were religious. We were very religious. And we also believed God that help. Hashem is going to take care of everything.
Right. Now, did you go to a shoe store or a shoemaker, a sheister?
A sheister.
Right. And how often would you get shoes?
Once a year.
Right.
Pesach, for Pesach.
And what about...
Not cheap shoes, not good ones.
And what about clothing? Did
also once a year.
And
we usually...
Did you go to a store to get the clothing? Or
we went to a store.
Okay.
To Minkaj, to a city close to or Ingrid, and we used to go to a store and buy clothes. And in shoes, we used to go to a store called Batya.
Right, that was a big chain, right? Or
a big chain, a big shoe chain.
Right.
And
so
we didn't really have any money.
So you don't remember going to a Schneider to make your clothes?
Yes, I did, in the village.
Right.
Only once in my lifetime, when one of my uncles was getting married, and we were all going to the wedding to Minkaj, to the big city, so we sort of splurged. We had clothes made and dressed up, and a lot of stuff was made. A lot of the suits were made from other materials, from different kind of clothes.
Right. So which uncle was that? What was his name?
Meyer.
Meyer?
Yeah, who married a rich girl in Minkaj.
Right. And do you remember your parents getting newspapers?
Yes.
Do you know anything about them?
Yes. My father used to read the paper every day.
I mean, was that...
My father also had somewhat of an education. He used to read when the Hungarians came in, I remember he used to read the Hungarian Magyar Nemzet or Esti Courier, Hungarian newspapers.
Right.
And sometimes he used to read in the shul for the whole congregation too. We all joined everything and shared everything.
Would your father read a Jewish paper?
He would read a Jewish paper. They had no Jewish papers.
Right.
We didn't have any Jewish papers.
Oh, okay. So they didn't throw the newspaper in the driveway back then, did they?
Nothing was thrown away.
No, I mean, they didn't deliver the paper, did they?
No. There had to be someone from the village was going to the city, and he'd always bring back the following day a paper.
Right.
To share for half the village would share with it, that newspaper.
Now, did they use the newspaper for toilet paper?
Yes.
Right. And you never had a radio?
No, we never had a radio.
Do you remember listening to a radio?
Yes.
Right. And did you ever have a maid?
You kidding?
No.
There was no such thing.
Right. And did anyone in your family play a musical instrument?
Yes.
Who?
My Uncle Meyer.
What did he play?
He played the fiddle.
Right.
The violin.
Now, do you ever remember going on vacations?
Never.
Never.
There was no such thing as vacations.
Right. And what language did you speak?
I spoke Yiddish in the house.
Right.
And on the street I used to speak Ukrainian.
Right.
And my parents spoke Hungarian. Because when they were born in the 1800s, late 1800s, that part of the world belonged to Austria-Hungary. And when I was born, it was Czechoslovakia.
Right.
And when the Nazis invaded to Sudetenland, and the Czech Republic was taken over by the Hungarians. You're probably familiar with the history of that part of the world.
Yeah. Now, were you ever bar mitzvahed?
Yes.
During the war?
I was bar mitzvahed. The Hungarians were there already when I was bar mitzvahed.
Right.
I figured if I was born in 1929, so it would have been 13 years later.
42.
So 42, I would have been bar mitzvah.
Right. So what do you remember about your bar mitzvah?
Everything. It was a very big thing to be bar mitzvah over there for a Jewish boy.
Did you have a big party?
There was, I tell you how it was. I davened.
Right.
And I read my Haftorah. And I said a few words in Yiddish. And then, everybody, the whole congregation, you met in the Kurstiebel, in the adjacent to the shul, like inside the shul, an extra room. And my grandmother and my mother baked a cake, and my father brought in a few bottles of Slivovitz, and everybody had a drink of Slivovitz and a piece of cake, and they wished Mazel Tov and L'chaim, and that was the whole spiel.
Right. So you think it's better that way, or the way it is in America, where they have these big parties?
Well, it's good for the caterers here, and it's good for business, and it's very nice to have a party. I mean, but we just didn't have any. We didn't know of any such thing.
Right. Now, was anyone in your family Zionist?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because they used to try to enlist. People came to the village, tried to enlist some of the Jewish kids to join, the Zionistische Schule, become Zionist, but the rabbi condemned it.
Right. Do you remember the name of the rabbi?
No.
No. And would you say that your family, before the war, were they rich or poor?
They're very poor.
Very poor. Why would you say very poor?
Because we didn't have any luxury. We didn't have automobiles. We didn't have radios. We didn't have lamps. We didn't have hot and cold running water. We just had each other, family. And we had religion, which sustained us.
Right, but wasn't that the way everyone was in Europe then?
Yes. In my village, almost everyone was the same way.
Right.
And everyone seemed, I would know now that thinking back, I was just a young kid, but it seemed like everybody was content.
Right. Now, were all your friends Jewish, or were they mixed?
They were mixed.
Were they mostly Jewish?
Mostly Jewish.
And what kind of education did you have?
Very limited. I had only a public school education, and I didn't even finish public school.
Right. Okay.
But the only education that I really had is I studied Chumash, Rasha, and I started to study Gemara. You know, you understand what I'm saying?
Right. So did you go to a cheder?
Yes.
Right. Now, when you went to the public school, you had to walk to school?
Yes.
How much time did it take to walk to school?
10 minutes.
And was that school, was it only boys?
No, it was mixed. Boys, girls.
And was everyone Jewish?
No.
So what percentage do you think were Jewish?
I'd say maybe 20 or 30%. I'm sort of guessing.
And what do you remember about the school?
What do I remember? I remember that they were very strict, and I got beaten up pretty often.
Why?
For whatever reason, these school teachers were walking around with a long stick in their hand, and if you didn't, whatever, I can't, I'm trying to think, back, all these years and think how things were, and I remember I was beaten up many times, and also at times I came late or some other stuff, or we sort of like kids were behaving badly. We had to roll up our pants and stand on the, sit on our knees there on the wooden floors and being punished. They did physically punished. Even the rabbis used to hit us.
Right.
And you couldn't come home and tell your parents because you'd get more.
Right. Did the boys and the girls sit separately?
Yes.
Right. And did you have your own desk, or did you share a desk?
Well, we had like a desk. We shared a desk with
right.
some other kids sitting, there.
Right. Did one teacher teach all the subjects, or was it different teachers?
No, one teacher was teaching all the subjects.
And what was
There weren't too many subjects to teach in those times. The only subject they were teaching us was history, like Hungarian history, and they were teaching us how to read and how to write.
What about mathematics?
And somewhat mathematics.
What was your favorite subject?
My favorite subject was history.
Right. Did you also have a gym class?
No, but we did, horse around and play. We didn't have any gym teachers or gym classes.
Right. Do you still remember where the school was?
Where it was?
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the village.
Right.
It was one big house. It was the schoolhouse.
So it was like one story?
We had one school, a big schoolhouse in the village, and we had a shul that the Jewish people built also in the village, and also there was a Catholic, like a... well, I don't know what denomination, but I think it was Catholic or Protestant.
Right. Now, so you also went to a cheder?
Yes.
And where was the cheder?
It was in my house, and my neighbor's house, and so on and so forth.
So you said the Malamed would go to everyone's house?
Yes.
And who would he teach in your house?
He would teach the Jewish children.
Oh, a whole bunch of children would come to your house?
Yeah, the Jewish kids from the village would come to my house, and he'd stay there 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, and then he'd move on to one of our neighbors, one of the other Jewish families' house, and then we went over there to the kids congregated over there, and the Malamed used to sleep in our house and eat in our house and teach the children.
Was it always the same Malamed?
Malamed is a teacher.
Yeah, was it always the same one?
Wasn't the same one. Every season, the Jewish people hired a Malamed, a yeshiva bucher or somebody, to come and teach the children.
Okay. And what would you learn in the cheder?
We would learn to daven, pray, and we'd learn mostly Chumash, the weekly Sedre chapter for the week. We learned to really read and translate it, and also we'd study Rasha, and we started to study, when I got a little older, after Bar Mitzvah, I started to study Gemara.
Right. So did you like going to cheder?
Excuse me?
Did you enjoy the cheder or not?
Yes, I used to like the cheder.
Right. And was that every day?
Every day, except Shabbos.
Right. Now, do you remember anti-Semitism before the war?
Yes, there was anti-Semitism. They didn't like us.
So what do you remember about anti-Semitism?
Well, I don't remember how, but we did have, we got along with the people. We had no problem with any of them, and they had no problem with the Jewish people before the Nazis came in, before
Right.
the Hungarians came in. We sort of got along with the people, with the neighbors, and then on many occasions, we used to help each other.
Right. Do you remember ever being called names, or
Yes.
what kind of names would they call you?
Lousy Jews, Žid,
Right.
Žid Vonyachi,
Right.
you Žid go to Palestine,
Right.
Žid Christ killers,
Right.
stuff like that.
Well, going to Palestine, that wouldn't have been such bad advice.
No, it wouldn't have been.
No.
No, it was a good advice, but
Right. They didn't. Yeah.
we should have, really.
Right. And will you ever get in fights with them?
Yes, we got into little, hassles from time to time, but nothing serious.
Right. Were you a strong kid?
I think I was.
And
I was a master sergeant in the American Army
right.
for 4 years. I was 16 months in the Korean War.
Were you ever afraid to go out on the holidays?
No.
No. Now, what do you remember about Shabbos?
Shabbos was Shabbos. Shabbos, we didn't work. We didn't have our animals work. We observed the Shabbos. We went to shul Shabbos morning. We came home, we had our lunch, and we went for a walk or whatever we did, or went to visit one of our neighbors or friends or family and uncles or aunts, got together, we talked. They usually had sort of engaged in conversation, talked about whatever people talk about, And in the afternoon, we went back to shul, to Mincha Maariv, and that was the end of Shabbos.
Now, did someone have to turn the lights on?
We didn't have lights to be turned on. Oh, nobody. We didn't have a Shabbos. We had somebody to put the lights on, but we didn't have any electricity.
Right. Okay. And do you know what shul you belong to?
In the wintertime, we used to have a Gentile come in, or Gentile man or woman, to make fire because it was very cold.
Right.
And we only had one shul.
Oh. And what do you remember about the other Jewish holidays?
I remember all the Jewish holidays.
So what do you...
Pesach, Shvias, Sukkot.
Yeah, what do you remember about Sukkot?
We built a sukkah on the outside by the house, and we used to eat and pray in the sukkah.
Right. And what do you remember about Passover?
The same as here. We had the Seder, but not the way we have it here, but we had a Seder that was really lasting practically all night. We fell asleep, the young kids, because my father and the family really did the Seder the old-fashioned way.
Right. So they would have a Haggadah?
Of course we would have a Haggadah.
Right. And did they hide the matzah like they do today?
They had the matzah, the afikonim.
Right. Yeah. And
they asked the 4 questions.
Right.
And they answered the 4 questions. And they were discussing Pesach. They were discussing the Yetzias Mitzrayim, how the Jews were taken out of Egypt, and how they received the 10 Commandments. All these things were very important. It was a way of life with my family, with my father and mother.
Right. Now, do you remember celebrating Hanukkah?
Of course.
And you lit a menorah?
Yes.
And do you remember playing with a dreidel?
We did.
Right.
And we remember getting Hanukkah geld.
Right.
But
now
all these holidays were very important. Part of our life, part of our religion.
Do you remember seeing a lot of American money before the war?
One time I'd seen $5.
Once? Right.
Once. My grandmother received from her son here in the United States. And we thought it was such a big deal.
Right.
It was. As a matter of fact, it was.
Right.
The dollar at that time was, my God, it was an awful lot of money.
Okay, now anything else you remember from your childhood that was particularly important from before the war?
Nothing much except, what I told you, that, I come from a family of two more brothers and a sister. My father and mother were very young when they were murdered. And all our people, which you know, and it's a matter of record of what happened. And we'll never get over it, never forget it. And I guess we have to live with that thing.
Right. How much younger than you was David?
David was, I guess, maybe 2 years younger.
And what about Hinda?
Hinda was also younger. The youngest, I think the youngest had to be maybe 5 years.
Okay.
Abraham, the youngest brother.
Right. What do you
remember when we went to Auschwitz? My mother had him in her arms.
Right. What do you remember about David?
He was my younger brother.
Right.
And he sort of followed more or less in the same way I did.
Right. Do you remember anything about your sister?
Not really.
No? And what about Abraham, the little one?
Also not much. He was just a kid in the house growing up like we did.
Right. So was your father someone that smoked a pipe, or...
My father never smoked.
No, he never smoked.
No.
So when did things start to get bad?
Well, when the Hungarians came in, the Jewish children, the Jewish kids, you know, the Hungarians didn't have an army because for some reason they at that time before the war they didn't have, but they had what they call leventas, like they had like the Boy Scouts here they call it, or the youth, or the Hitler youth, or the Hungarian youth. So all the non-Gentiles were able to join the leventas, they call them.
Right.
And the Jews were separated. We couldn't join. We had to go to work.
Okay.
You know. And
so when did the Hungarians come in?
Well, the Hungarians came in, I suppose, in 1942.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly of the date, but I'm sure you interviewed many people from that part of the world. So.
What happened to school when they came in?
Well, the schools were also more or less separated. You were able to go to a Hungarian school or go to a Christian school, what they call the Goyish school.
Right.
So I remember myself going to a Hungarian school.
So you had to learn Hungarian?
Yeah, well, because my parents also spoke Hungarian, and I learned Hungarian, more or less Hungarian history, a little bit, but I still remember part of it.
Oh, okay. And what happened to your father's business when the Hungarians came in?
When the Hungarians were then, he's still farming. Nothing happened. The Jewish people kept whatever property, you know, they had. Nothing was taken away from us until, 1944, when they came and they ordered the Jewish people to assemble, and there was a notary house there, at the notary's house, and only take what you can carry.
Right, now...
Period. That was last time we seen our home.
Right.
We had to leave the house, leave everything, and just come as you are, and only what you can carry.
Right. Now, during the war, do you remember a lot more anti-Semitism when the Hungarians came in?
Of course, they took my father one day because my father said something that we're human beings and we're not animals. They put him up against the wall and they were hitting him before we were even taken to the brick factory. They put him up against the wall and they kept hitting him till he was spitting with blood.
Oh, that's horrible.
It was awful. Even now, I have nightmares sometimes, thinking back and seeing that scene over and over.
So you had to see that yourself?
I seen it, and my poor mother was running over there crying, begging to leave him. So they hit her and smacked her and knocked her down on the floor also.
Who did that?
The Hungarian Nazis.
Right. Was that by the house?
It was not by my house. At one of the houses where the Jews assembled before we were taken to the brick factory.
Right. Now, during the war, did you have any idea what was going on in Poland? Did you know about Auschwitz? Or
we didn't know anything until we got to Auschwitz.
So did you know they were killing Jews at all?
We had no idea what was happening, really.
As
a matter of fact, we thought when we were taken that we were going to go someplace to work.
Now, do you think...
I have no idea even now. Sometimes I'm puzzled to think back, and I said, how could it have been? You know, people must have had radio somewhere to listen to the Americans or the Russians broadcast to see what was happening. That, you know, if we would have remained in our houses another 8-9 months, the Russians were there already.
Right. Now, do you think it's possible that your parents knew something and they just didn't tell you?
Well, if they did know, the children didn't know. We didn't know. It's possible.
I mean, weren't you pretty sheltered compared to children today?
I don't know. I think today children are smarter, more informed, more worldly. You know, we were very limited what we were told.
Right. So during the war, you were going to school and
everything until really when the Jews were taken.
So until 44, things weren't dramatically different.
They were different, but not dramatically different.
Right. Okay.
I mean, they weren't killing us, and they let us live in our homes, and let us go on and doing whatever we were doing.
Right.
The Hungarian Jews were taken last, as you know.
Right. So what happened in 1944?
Well, in 1944, they took all the Jewish people from our village and all the neighboring villages. They assembled us in one location, and from there they trucked us to a brick factory. Now,
did they knock on your door and say you got to leave, or was there signs posted, or how did you?
They announced that they had these barkers,
right,
that went through the village announcing that all the Jews have to, by so-and-so, assemble over there. And we had no idea what was happening, but naturally we were afraid. Everybody was afraid and scared, not knowing what happened. If you seen Fiddler on the Roof,
right, yep.
That's the kind of village I come from, that type.
Right. Okay, and what could you bring with you from your house?
Just what you could carry.
What?
We carried some clothes, some food.